Okay.
And we're live already.
Hello, Wicomico.
Good morning. Going to call this meeting to order and going to start with the work session on the Compensation and Allowance Commission. Ms. Hurley, what are the names that we have? Everyone should have them emailed.
The resumes were sent out to everyone.
And it's only like 5.
There's only 5. We've only received 5 resumes right now. And the Chapter 18 actually says there should be 11. Actually, it says shall consist of 11 members. So my suggestion would be to just postpone the closed session until maybe the November 2nd meeting, and then we can re-advertise and extend that period through the end of this month. The advertising period through the end of the month.
That sounds good to me. Is everyone else in agreement with that?
If we don't get enough candidates to appoint, can council fill in? Oh, it's just a question. I mean, we're supposed to have 11.
It's a legitimate question.
Well, council's supposed to make the appointments, so we would have to ask our attorney whether or not that would be ethical or not.
Yeah.
How many are the ones? Could we possibly still be waiting for some of the individuals who did it the last time, who did this for us the last time we were on this committee the last time?
We did have 2. I did reach out to all the individuals that served on the committee last time, except for one individual. I was not able to get her contact information because she had provided her work information, and she's no longer at that place of employment. But I did reach out to all the other prior commission members. Two of the 11 did resubmit their applications or resumes.
Okay.
I did have somebody that was interested. They're on the charter review, and they're worried about conflict of time. But Laura explained to me that she had to be to both of those, so there wouldn't be any conflict. So I'll reach out to him again and see if he is interested.
And I have a lady that's on the Charter Review Committee that I asked her yesterday, and she was also concerned about the time. And I said, I think we would have enough time after this is done, the Charter Review Committee. So she is interested. So that would be 5, 6, 7. We need the rest of the council members to appoint someone.
I think you should take advantage of this opportunity and talk about how you intend to select the members once we get enough resumes. And if you get more than the 11, to narrow down the number.
No, I didn't.
All right. What does everybody think? How should we handle this process?
Sounds like we're going to approve 11. I don't think we're going to have 12.
Can we get away without 11 as long as it's an odd number?
It says shall.
Yeah, the code said shall consist of 11 members. So I think we need to have 11 members serve.
You do, if you don't get them.
We need to try harder.
Right.
I mean,
104,000 people in the county will start polling people as they walk by in the street.
I advertised it on my
go to
site.
the detention center and get some of those folks to come over again.
After I talked to Ms. Hurley yesterday, I got a phone call from the lady, and I asked her then. So I think it's just simple that we, all 7 of us, reach out and ask somebody. Then hopefully the 5 extra would be people that we can choose from.
I think we can do that. It's just I think there's a lot of people who would typically be pulled for this that are serving on. We have multiple other commissions going on,
right,
things like that, and so I think and a tough time of year, I think usually, but.
Does everyone agree to extend the advertising period through the end of the month?
Yeah.
And then we can meet again on November the 2nd to discuss.
At the next meeting.
Will you be reaching out to the applicants who've already submitted there so they know?
Yes,
Okay.
I will.
Mm-hmm. All right. Ernie, you okay with that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Do we have Bill on the line yet?
And just in case we do, by chance, get more than the 11, did you want to talk about how you intend to select the 11? I mean, are you going to have one council member select one individual? That would give you 7 members. Another thought would then be the remaining 4. You would just maybe, whichever ones have the most tallies.
Sure.
Similar to what we did with the Charter Review Committee.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think 7 council members should be able to pick one, and then we can vote on the additional to fill the 11.
And you would also be responsible for designating the chair, because that's also dictated in
The council designates the chair. Okay. All right, is everybody okay with that? Any more questions, comments? Anything else on that, Ms. Hurley?
That's it.
All right, well, that concludes this work session. Guess we can reconvene at 10 o'clock.
Breakfast.
Did somebody say breakfast?
Hey, I got a wrap if you want.
Yeah.
Alive.
I have 2, and they're still warm.
Nicole, would you like to read one of these? I'm gonna read both of them.
Vic Law says he'll put it on that committee.
Okay.
So,
Joe, do you want to read these?
No. I don't. Thanks anyway.
Yeah, I'm not going to.
It's all right.
She's already had. You can start any time. You can start any time.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to the October 19th, 2021 legislative session of the Wicomico County Council. I'd like to reconvene in this legislative session, and we'd like to call the meeting to order with the opening prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. And if you would like to join us, please stand.
Our Father,
Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day
our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses,
as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thy the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Ms. Hurley?
Good morning, Council President, council members, ladies and gentlemen. There are 4 items on the consent agenda this morning. We have the legislative minutes from October the 5th. We have open work session minutes from September the 7th pertaining to the American Rescue Plan interim report. We have open work session minutes from September the 7th on the proposed amendment for the fiscal year 22 capital budget and fiscal year 22 through 26 capital improvement program, on the fencing at the Department of Corrections. And we have open work session minutes from September the 7th on the on-site relocation of 0.57 acres of forest conservation easement located on Sparran Road.
All right, need a motion to approve the consent agenda. Got a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Passed unanimously. Ms. Hurley, do you want to make an announcement about the resolution on the agenda?
So we have resolution number, I believe it's 115, 2021. This is appointing a compensation allowance commission. That resolution will be postponed to the next council meeting scheduled for November the 2nd.
Yes, we did not have enough applicants, so we're going to extend the period until the end of the month. So if anyone's interested in serving, please contact the council office or Ms. Hurley. All right. Next, we have a proclamation for the National Federation of the Blind for White Cane Day. Ms. Patty Ann Baird and Ms. Ackley, Councilwoman Ackley.
Good morning. Thank you for coming today. You're welcome. Whereas the white cane symbolizes the ability for blind citizens to achieve a full independent life and the capacity to work productively in a competitive employment. And whereas every citizen should be aware that the law requires motorists and cyclists to use caution when approaching a blind person carrying a white cane. Whereas Maryland calls upon employers to utilize the employment skills of our blind citizens to recognize their worth as individuals and their productive capacities. Whereas the state of Maryland, through the public agencies with the assistance of the National Federation of the Blind, should facilitate the expansion of employment opportunities and greater acceptance of blind persons in the competitive labor market. Therefore, the Acting County Executive and Wicomico County Council hereby proclaim October 19th as White Cane Awareness Day, and call upon all citizens to recognize the white cane as a tool of independence for blind pedestrians.
Thank you. It is an honor to be here this morning. Thank you for having me. As a correction, the White Cane Awareness Day is the 15th, but let it slide because blind people are blind all the time, just not on the 15th. So, well, first of all, I'm going to introduce myself. I am Patty Ann Baird. I am the president of the Eastern Shore chapter of Maryland's National Federation of the Blind. We have had a chapter here based in Salisbury, Wicomico County, for the past 18 years, I believe. It might be more than that, but I've been involved in the past 18 years. So I am glad to be here, glad to be part of Wicomico County, and glad to represent the blind community in the county and in the state of Maryland. So I keep on going on, and thank you for your time. Thank you. You're welcome. Do I need to stick around for those sort of thing? Okay, all right, thank you.
Ms. Baird, thank you for coming and thank you for your service to the blind. If there are any corrections on that, we'll correct it. As a matter of fact, we need one more signature from Councilman McCain, who's been out of the country for some time.
Should I take it from Kane?
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll get you an updated one, signed, sealed, and delivered. Yes.
I have her email address.
She's got it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you again, Ms. Baird.
Thank you.
Next, we have a proclamation to recognize Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Ms. Cindy Feist, Executive Director of Women Supporting Women. Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Whereas October is National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, which is an annual campaign to increase awareness of the disease and to increase public knowledge about the importance of early detection of breast cancer diagnosis and treatment. Whereas research shows that clinical breast examinations and screening mammograms can help reduce the number of deaths from breast cancer among women. And whereas every woman is at risk for breast cancer, even if she has no family history or other risk factors for the disease, and screening and early detection of breast cancer are vital to the health and well-being of all women. Now therefore, the acting county executive and the Wicomico County Council hereby proclaim October as National Breast Cancer Awareness Month in Wicomico County and encourage all women to learn about their risk for breast cancer and to talk to their healthcare provider about recommended breast cancer screenings and be screened with clinical breast examinations and mammograms. Done this 19th day of October, 2021, signed by the Acton County Executive and the entire council except Mr. McCain. So the same, we'll have Mr. McCain sign this.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And would you like to speak?
Awesome. Oh, bad thing to say to me. I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me here today. I think most of you know that Women Supporting Women has been around for a little bit. We have been, actually, it's our 28th year this year. And I guess what I want to say is last year we found out really what the community meant to us. We can do all the fundraisers we need to try to bring in money, but when things got shut down last year, we've really found out what the community meant to Women Supporting Women. And I'm sure there are a lot of other nonprofits out there that felt the same way, but it came from the local businesses, the nonprofits, the churches. It was amazing, the outpouring to help us make it through 2020. And still, I know it's difficult in 2021, but you know what? Women Supporting Women is still here. Doors are open. We did not close last year at all, and we provided our services through the year. So I really appreciate this. I love that you've recognized us. We're going to continue to do as much as we can for the community, and just want to thank you so much.
You're certainly welcome. And if you would, leave that with Ms. Hurley, and then
okay.
Get it signed for you.
All right, thank you.
I do want to point out that I did remember to wear my pink today. We usually have the pink ribbons, but I forgot to mention something to Ms. Hurley. We have pins that we keep every year, so we'll have them next year anyway. Ms. Hurley?
Okay, the first item on the agenda is resolution number 113-2021. This is approving the purchase of a deed of abrogation easement by Wicomico County, Maryland from Chesapeake Airport Properties, LLC, for air rights above the property located on the westerly side of and binding upon Airport Road. The work session was held on this request on October the 5th, and we have Mr. Tony Rudy here, the airport manager, if there are any questions.
Have a motion to approve resolution number 113-2021.
So move.
Have a motion, and do we have a second?
Second.
And we have a second by Mr. Davis. Any discussion? All in favor of resolution number 113-2021, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Passes unanimously. Ms. Hurley?
The next item for business is resolution number 114-2021, authorizing the acting county executive to accept a grant award from the Maryland Department of Transportation, State Highway Administration, FFY 2022 Recreational Trail Program in the amount of $50,000 to be utilized by the Wicomico County Department of Recreation, Parks, and Tourism for the Pirates Wharf development. And we have Mr. Steve Miller here, Director of Recreation, Parks, and Tourism.
Need a motion to approve resolution number 114-2021.
So move.
Got a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of resolution number 114-2021, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Thank you, Mr. McCain. Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye. Resolution number 114-2021 passed unanimously. Ms. Hurley?
Next on the agenda, we have an update from the Wicomico County Housing Authority by Mr. Don Bibb, the Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Gentlemen, ladies, how are we doing today?
Good morning.
I've seen quite a few around town lately.
Yes.
Yes.
Saw you in August.
In August, yes, and I saw Mr. Gannon, I think last week in Chrisfield.
I was there too.
I couldn't get around everybody.
I couldn't either.
Thank you for the invite today. I wanted to come in and give you an update. It's probably been, what, about 2 years since I've been before
Every
you?
bit
Of course,
that.
COVID added a little bit to that situation. But I wanted to let you know that we have quite a few things going on with the Housing Authority, obviously. I think the last time we met, we had a discussion about the completion of the Stone Grove Crossing project, as well as the Square at Merritt Mill, which we reinvested close to $40 million into affordable housing into the county. We're still tangling with what we're going to do with the old Booth Street Phase 2 site. As you remember, there were 100 units of federal housing sitting over on Booth Street. We were allowed to tear down 50 and relocate them to the new Stone Grove Crossing, and then we went to do Phase 2. HUD said we could not rebuild in a census tract that had the concentration that it did, so thus we ended up at Square at Merritt Mill. But that 5.75 acres, the board has had multiple discussions with me over the past couple of months on what we're going to do with it. I think what we're looking at, the current housing need, obviously with COVID, has shifted tremendously in the country. And I think before the end of this year, we're going to be entertaining some qualifications from tax credit developers to do something on that project site location. I'll keep you all informed as we get to that point on it. I think putting another $25 million reinvestment on Booth Street would be a tremendous attribute to the county and along lines with the city. In the past 2 years, we've had a reinvestment back into the scattered site units, both the ones that are vacant and the ones that are occupied, of $200,000. We just recently finished a $125,000 investment in improvements to units that are boarded up that we're getting ready to begin renovations on. We have a contract for 10 units that are going to be renovated, 5 in Fruitland, 5 in Salisbury. The contract was awarded by the board last month, and we're in the process of finalizing the paperwork with HUD. You guys probably have not been aware of the changes at HUD, but probably about 10 years ago, HUD came up with this inventive idea to replace the HOPE 6 program, which was the reinvestment of public and private partnerships into urban cities, tearing down blighted communities and rebuilding mixed-income communities. They've since replaced that probably about 10 years ago with the Rad Program. That's what we used for the Booth Street tear down and rehab, new construction. Since then, in January of this year, they came out with a new program called a Streamlined Voluntary Conversion Process, whereby housing authorities can actually take their entire federal portfolio and convert it to project-based vouchers. The board is seriously interested in pursuing that avenue. We're hoping that we're going to get out of that stigma image of being a public housing authority, because we're not housing of last resort, which a lot of people perceive we are. We are not. In that process, what we would do is we would take the entire portfolio, submit an application to HUD, and once approved, then our entire portfolio would become project-based vouchers. There's another avenue that we have recently discussed in the past 60 days, is a spinoff from RAD, where you can do a small agency blend, if you will. 80% of the units become market rate, and the other 20% remain at the RAD rents. Now, the difference between the two programs, obviously RAD rents are much lower than streamlined voluntary conversion market rate rents. So it's a more appealing deal, if you will, for agencies to look at going that avenue. And I'm hoping by the end of this year, the board has come to a conclusion, because there's a lot of avenues of interest that we have to look at. Okay. I'll keep you all apprised of that. I'm hoping I can come in on a regular basis and keep you all apprised in the future on things that are going on. We are in the process of putting in a 4% application, tax credit application, to the state of Maryland for a substantial rehab of the Riverside Apartments. You may be familiar with it, over on Winder in Alabama. 75 units, a mixed combination of efficiency and one-bedroom units. Fairly good shape, but it's aging, and the only way that we're going to get the capital funds that we need to do that is through the public-private partnership. So we have a local tax credit developer that we're working with right now on that. We're also involved in the new renovation plans for Gateway Village. We are partners with Home for America We're hoping to go to closing, I think, the end of November on the tax credit deal with the state of Maryland. And that should make a very interesting new collection of new units, well, I should say units, but newly renovated units. As you remember, Gateway was done in 3 phases, converting it all into 1 phase at this point in time. Looking forward to the opportunity to being part of that when it gets completed.
Okay.
One of the other things that we've been entertaining for the past 2 years is the rebranding of the Housing Authority. If you remember, when my agency took over the Wicomico Housing Authority back in 2015, we had a substantial amount of obstacles to overcome to bring the agency back, excuse me, into where it should be. We have reached a substantial point of that, and part of the discussion is that we'd like to change the name of the Housing Authority from the Wicomico County Housing Authority, because it does have certain association to the public that we are part of the county government, which we're not. So our proposal to you as a legislative body is that we propose a name change, which obviously has to go through this process with this committee. We're looking to change the name to the Housing Opportunities Commission of Wicomico. We've done name changes with other agencies that we oversee. It seems to bring a little bit easier discussion when you have the Housing Authority stigma taken and removed out of it. We've prepared documentation that we want to forward on to the council for consideration at their next session. It doesn't change our mission statement, but it does give a different perception from the public eyes of what we are doing. We have been recipient of 15 of HUD's emergency housing vouchers, and I'm saying this publicly now because we have these vouchers. We've had a few people apply. They aren't qualified. There are certain criteria that you have to meet to be eligible, but we do have 15 vouchers, and I would really like to get them out to the public. We are partnered with the local COC, Somerset County Department of Behavioral Health, but they are also partnered with the state of Maryland. The state of Maryland has a large amount of those vouchers that they're trying to also actively issue. So if anyone knows in your jurisdiction people that are in need, it's basically related to individuals who have lost housing due to COVID, evicted or in the process of being evicted, and it also will work with people who have experienced domestic violence. I think I've covered my list.
All right. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Bibb?
Yes.
Mr. Holloway?
On the scattered housing, what's the average cost of rehabbing each one of those houses?
When we did the last 15, the average cost was around $63,000. Today's cost with construction prices at what they are, the 10 houses, we have a contract for a little under $1 million.
How many houses do you have boarded up?
There's 27 throughout
Still
the county.
boarded up. Now, you mentioned this Rad program. It's like a private partnership. Is it similar to what you did to the housing at Boo Street, where you guys pretty much turn it over to someone else?
It is. It's a partnership between public and private interests.
So it's like, along with your name change, you guys are getting out of the housing business. You guys
No, we're going to stay in the housing business. We just don't want to be called a housing authority.
Well, it seemed like you're getting rid of your houses. You're turning them over to a private partnership. You just said this Rad program is what you're going to do with them. You're turning over, just like you did the Boo Street townhouses.
Well, the 90 units, we're going to retain ownership on those. The 75 units at Riverside, we'll retain management rights on that and a percentage of ownership as well.
So which ones are you going to use the Rad program on?
We currently have a Rad approval for the 90 scattered sites.
So those are the ones that are going to be turned over to a private?
No, they're going to be kept under the portfolio of the Housing Authority.
So which one are you going to use with the private partnership?
Public-private partnership would be Riverside, the 75 units.
Okay. Anyone on this side? Mr. Hastings?
Well, I honestly don't know nearly enough about the County Housing Authority and your work, but you had mentioned potentially moving over to completely to vouchers as an option. Can you further expand on that? I guess what are you thinking for? Is that something that the organization, the board, I guess, wants to move in that direction, or? didn't quite follow all of what you
Well,
were
it
saying.
seems to be a move nationwide by a lot of housing authorities. As I said, there were the original option to housing authorities were back in the late 90s was to do the Hope 6 project, which was the demolition and new construction and creating mixed income communities in urban cities. Since then, smaller rural areas have had difficulty with that because you have to have a certain number of units to make it viable for investors to look at doing a deal with you. Rad gave the opportunity for housing authorities to convert their units through a public-private partnership if they chose. There's not a whole lot of housing authorities nationwide that has a balance sheet that could step up to the plate and borrow $22 million to build a new housing project. So that's the public and private partnerships that get created. When these communities are converted, the nice thing about it is the residents do not end up paying any more money that they currently pay as a public housing resident. The difference is made up through a voucher, whether you're project-based or project assistance, those particular units. And it's based on the market rate conditions in each geographic area because it varies from area to area nationwide.
All right. Mr. Cannon, do you have a comment?
Yeah, thanks for being here, Mr. Bibb.
Sure.
Good talking to you. Right, I noticed it looks to me like in the last 5 years, because I know back in 2016 you had about 40 houses boarded up, and 24 of them were in, and you also had an additional 20.
Mr. Cannon, does somebody have a phone on or?
Maybe Bill.
It's Bill.
Hey, Mr. McCain, can you mute that? Sorry about that, Mr. Cannon. That was kind of distracting.
Yeah, you had 40 boarded up, and you had an additional 24 that were in bad shape, as you had described back then. So I'm assuming that the 24 that were in bad shape are now fully
Rehabbed them, they're
rehabbed.
reoccupied.
Yeah. So you've gotten 13 completely taken the boards off and had them total rehabs as well. So that's
Actually, 15.
15. Okay, well that's good because that's about 3 a year, which is good. What I always seem to find difficult to understand is that you're saying it's the cost is around $100,000 a house to rehab those.
That's the current cost estimate we have, yes.
Yeah, because I mean I'm in the business, you know that.
I know that.
And I've never spent $100,000 to repair a house, especially ones that were built in the 1970s. I mean, the ones I have were built in 1920, and I still don't spend $100,000 to rehab them. And despite what a lot of people may like to think, when we fix the house up, it's in great shape. So I just find it a little bit confusing that it's costing $100,000 to repair a house. I don't know how that's happening.
I was shocked by the response, too. But we used a contracting entity that did solicitation to local contractors. And we're talking about a mixed bag of 2, 3, and 4 bedroom houses, single-family homes. And remember, those were old modular houses, I believe, that were Salisbury housing group that went defunct back in the late 70s, early 80s. So they're not very energy efficient, and they were built to a modular standard back then. So we're talking about total gut rehab, taking out the walls, the ceilings, the floors, redoing it, putting in, getting rid of the electric baseboard heat and putting in central heat pump systems, bringing them up to today's energy standards, new roof, siding, windows, doors. So it's almost a total rebuild, if you will. Now, granted, we all know construction prices have increased tremendously in the past 18 months. And back in mid-16, when we did the first 15, we were paying $63,000 for them back then. So given the current market conditions, it seems slightly high, but in reality, it's not, given what the cost factors for materials are right now.
Well, I thought the 63,000 was. I had taken a note that there was actually $5 million that you had been appropriated, which averaged out to about 78,000. But even 63, I think, is exorbitant for remodeling houses that were built in the 1970s. But I don't know. We're not going to accomplish any, we're not going to create any solutions here today. I realize that. I was just expressing my concerns as far as the costs are concerned. How many bids do you get that come in from contractors?
I believe there were 3 bids that came in on that project.
Yeah.
Now, I would certainly like to talk to any contractors that want to give us a better price, obviously.
Sure.
But I know we're doing a tax credit project in Easton, and when we submitted the application to the state for that project back in early 2020, we had pricing, obviously Harkins was the general contractor, and right now that project is about $1.2 million over budget because of construction costs. So it's across the board. I mean, in some areas it's more. Do I feel comfortable paying $100,000 for the renovation of a house that old? I don't, but we want to get them opened up and reused. And when we looked at replacement factors for those particular units, right now it's running about $150,000, $160,000 to tear out what's there and put something else back in. And here's the deal, guys. I mean, we're not a county budget line item, so the monies we have to secure ourselves to accomplish the task of the renovations. And that was one of the last items I wanted to bring to the council's attention. If next year we could get some consideration of you all sponsoring a CDBG application for the Housing Authority so that we can perpetuate, quicker turnaround on these vacant units.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. Some of the council members might remember we've had this same exact discussion in the past about that figure. In the last 10 months, the way lumber has gone up, I would expect it would be more than $100,000 now. Mr. Hastings, you look like you had a question. Mr. Holloway?
No. Okay. So thank you for coming in, Mr. Bibb. I definitely need to do my homework in the role that the council plays in the agency, so I appreciate you coming in. I had a question on the Rad program. Now, with this program, does it still have the same criteria for credit scores and incarceration rates for applicants?
The Rad program is a one-for-one replacement of current residents. I mean, when we did Booth Street in the phases, we had 50 units at a time. So anybody who's a current resident at the time the application is approved or funded or locked in for first right of refusal to return back to the new community.
Okay.
So the process for them as current applicants wouldn't change. They'd still go through an annual recertification process. The only time that credit and criminal really come into play is a new applicant. And sometimes your private market management companies have a little bit more stringent policy than housing authorities do with bringing in people to qualify them.
All right. And then if you could just email me the information on the most recent funding that you have. You said that you had some vouchers that
Yeah, I have those 15 vouchers, and I'd love to get them out on the street.
Yeah, if you don't mind emailing that, I appreciate it.
Okay, sure.
Mr. Holloway?
I have two comments. One's a question. Is the on these units scattered are your developments? You pay property taxes to the city and the county?
We pay a pilot.
Pardon me?
We pay a pilot every year.
Can you explain that?
Pilot is a payment in lieu of taxes that typically your non-for-profit entities within the jurisdiction make to the local jurisdiction in lieu of paying property tax.
So what does that average out to? Is that like half of what the property taxes would be, or 2/3 or 1/3?
Basically, there's a formula process that HUD has housing authorities use. It's based on your shelter rent income minus utility expenses and other expenses outside of the cooperation agreement. So it's actually a formula process, and it ends up being about 10%.
So you pay about 10% of the property taxes that would normally be
10% of what our profit is after our income and expenses.
Oh, okay. So you don't really know what the average payment would be on a unit if it was you were paying regular taxes or going through the pilot?
I don't.
Yeah,
I
okay,
don't.
that's fine. I was just thinking.
If I could step in, my experience in Fruitland has been year after year, they can't believe it's that low, what they get paid in the pilot as opposed to regular taxes.
So it's a lot.
It's quite low, yeah.
Quite low. I was just thinking about our building across the street. They got free property taxes, the city and the county, you know. So anyway, the other question I have, have you ever thought of, just sitting here listening to your cost of rehabbing, of doing something like what Habitat does, you know, putting, you know, a family in a house and
Sweat
letting them
equity.
rehab it, and, you know, in lieu of paying rent? Has that ever been a thought? That's probably
To be honest with you, I've never heard of any of my colleagues around the country attempting to approach that situation. Our current dilemma nationwide is we had a lot of families that had a misconception about COVID and just didn't pay rent. And we run an income-based program, so technically there's no reason why they were not paying rent, because their rent was based on their income.
right.
So, I mean, what you're proposing, sweat equity, I mean, Habitat did that for a good while, and then unfortunately when COVID hit, volunteers weren't there to help out, and families weren't able to meet their hour requirements, so I think they ended up stepping up to the plate and doing the houses on their own.
Okay, it was just a thought. Thank you.
Right. For the record, the council does know what pilot and TIF is. I think you just want to know what your program or how it worked. Is there any more questions or comments? Mr. Bibb, thank you for coming. One thing I did want to mention, it's good to have you back and to put you back under, this keeps coming in and out, and to put you back on our radar screen. But the question I have you been meeting with the county executive?
I did. I had a meeting October 7th with
Okay.
county exec. It was a very good meeting. We talked about a lot of things, and I felt good about the meeting coming out. Actually, my board chair, Mark Thompson, was there with me.
Okay, good.
So I look forward to future meetings. In fact, the county exec wants me to make arrangements to pick him up and take him around and show him our various communities, which I think is a great idea, because, you know, that's part of the dilemma people don't understand is, you know, locations and what's going on. I can tell you I had a conversation with the code enforcement officer yesterday in Fruitland, and we were talking about the 5 units that we're going to be renovating out there. And one of the points he brought to my attention was, you know, when the Housing Authority boarded up those units ever so many years ago, they put plywood, and they painted the plywood black. And of course, when you drive around, those properties do look somewhat of a blight condition. So this morning I had a conversation with staff, and we're actually going to go around and take the plywood off of those windows in Fruitland, because we have 10 units in Fruitland, to see what difference it's going to make in that appearance. And if that's the case, that it does improve the quality of the neighborhood, then we'll look at doing the ones that we have in Salisbury. Our dilemma in the past has been, when winter comes, we have a lot of homeless folks throughout the county, unfortunately, and vacant properties have a tendency to become their new homes.
Okay.
So it's a security issue of consideration too, but we're going to see what it does to the curb appeal and appearance to the community by taking those boards down.
All right. The reason I asked about meeting with the county executive, that branch, both branches really need to be on the same page before we can really accomplish anything. I think we had a good, productive meeting this morning, and look forward to seeing you again. And if you would give some information to Ms. Hurley, we can see if we can put you on the agenda again for an upcoming meeting.
I'd like to do it every quarter if it's all right with the council.
We can work something out.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you. Ms. Hurley, do you have any idea why the microphones aren't working like they should?
So the microphones are set up so that way it picks up according to how you talk, basically. So if you were to step back a little bit farther from it, instead of being right up close like this, it shouldn't fade in and out as much.
Okay, I'll try that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bibb. Need a motion to adjourn from the Urban Services, wait a minute. Need a motion to adjourn from the legislative session and convene as the Urban Service Commission. Have a motion, and do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second by Mr. Holloway. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, now we're in the Urban Services Commission. Before us, we have resolution number 02-2021 to initiate the creation of the Urban Service District for street lighting in the Wellington Estates subdivision. Mr. Whitelock.
Good morning.
Deputy Director from Public Works.
So we have a petition from the residents of Wellington Estates to create urban service district for Wellington Estates.
Yeah.
And we have the required number of signatures and are here today to ask to move forward into a engineering design phase.
Okay. One of the questions that the council member brought up was, were there different options? Because when we've done this in the past, there were like 3 different options for the citizens.
I haven't got to that part yet, Larry.
Well, actually, I mean, this is the first one of these that I've done, so I'm not aware. I can check into that and get back with council.
You don't get to that phase until we approve this, and then the electric company will get those 3 options to the residents.
Pretty different types of, like LED. But
LED, the poles, and
Right.
stuff like that. The electric company.
There are different prices. And
Yeah, they'll propose, once we approve this, and he contact the electric company, they'll come out there, and they'll plot where they're gonna put the lights and so forth, and they'll come up with the poles and the price then, and then they'll come back to the residents.
Sounds like Mr. Davis could lead this discussion.
I've done a couple of them.
Thank you. I did have that
this
question.
has certainly been a learning curve for me since this is the first one I've done.
Well, it's been a while since we've done one. And I thought we brought this one up once before.
No.
No, we haven't.
I will say this: it's a looped community, and it's very dark in there with only front porch illumination. So,
Well, yeah.
I certainly think it's needed.
Any questions for Mr. Whitelock? All right. Need a motion to approve resolution number 02-2021.
So move.
And a second.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of resolution number 02-2021, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye. Resolution number 02-2021 passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Whitelock.
Thank you.
Need a motion to adjourn from the Urban Services Commission to reconvene in the legislative session.
So move.
Got a motion. Do we have a second? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. At this time, we are going to open the floor to public comments. Please limit all public comments to 3 minutes or less. Any presented material may be submitted to the council members. If so, please include 10 copies. No derogatory remarks, personal attacks, obscene language, or disruptive behavior. Yes, we have somebody already. Good morning.
Good morning, President Dye, and members of the County Council, and to the County Executive in his absence. My name is Mary Ashanti, and I am a resident of Wicomico County. My reason for speaking with you today is the same one that is about countywide water and sewer. And the reason why I keep coming up is because for 70 years or more that I can remember, that has been an issue in Wicomico County, even to the point of in the early years, people having outhouses, community outhouses. I can remember on Westover Hill, there were row houses and one community outhouse. Over in Newport Circle, there were, and there's still the brick houses, but there were also outhouses in those areas. I don't know where Wicomico County fit with other counties in countywide water and sewer, but this is urgent as far as I'm concerned, because many of the old houses that have a sewer and water, sewer and their own source of water will be in need of that, because from my understanding, it takes a lot of money to for a homeowner to replace their septic tank or well or whatever. Folks in the area where I live are on septic in their own well. And many of the houses are old. So the other concern that I have is that I did listen to the report, the master plan, the draft of it, and it was 12 areas that was mentioned that needed countywide water and sewer. But in the report, from what I heard, is that 10, that committee is only recommending that 10 areas be selected instead of the entire 12 areas. So I need to know, and I think that the citizens of Wicomico County needs to know as to where are the locations of the 2 areas that will be omitted, and quite frankly, why are they being omitted? This has been a long time coming, and I would hope that if there's 12 areas in the county that need countywide septic and water, that you would include all 12 of those areas. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Shante. As you know, that we have a work session coming up on the water and sewer. Do we have any more public comments? Yes, sir. Ma'am, could you go to the podium, please?
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me? Great. I'm here speaking on behalf of the Wicomico Environmental Trust. Can you hear me now?
No, your name.
Carol Donahue, sorry, from Whitehaven. I'm here speaking on behalf of the Wicomico Environmental Trust today as the chair of its Environmental Justice Committee. And I think we certainly would agree that that the draft water and sewer plan raises some of the most consequential environmental issues the council has had before it for some time, and it will have a direct economic effect one way or another on most or all of our county residents. We have had limited opportunity to review the plan so far. From what we can see, it's very impressive in its reach. Very carefully done. The issues will take some time for county residents and organizations to analyze. And so our main message today is really that for reasons of buy-in and equity, the council really needs to make this process as transparent as possible and hold a series of hearings around the county so that everyone has a chance to consider these issues. Open communication, we think, will be key. The Wicomico Environmental Trust supports clean water and smart growth. It's important to acknowledge that we can't have one without the other, and I think that the plan tries to communicate that as well. There are some urgent public health needs in the county that need to be addressed. But we have to strike a balance, as the draft plan acknowledges, that also protects the watershed, the water quality that we all drink, and our land areas that buffer residences against flooding. That will be a difficult balance to strike to everyone's satisfaction, and you've got a big job in front of you. The last thought is that we are concerned about the cost. The plan proposes or appears to contemplate a monthly fee of $30 for those who are hooked up to one of these new package treatment plants, and perhaps that's affordable for most residents in the county, probably not for everyone. We have to think about what to do if the cost estimates don't pan out. if the population doesn't rise as the plan projects, so that we don't have people choosing between paying these fees and covering their living expenses in other areas. So we just exhort the council to be mindful of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have any more council comments? Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. I'm Judith Stribling. I chair the Natural Resources Conservation Advisory Committee, but as Carol Donahoe mentioned, many of us haven't had a chance to really thoroughly review this plan. Okay. Whoa. I'm taller than you, Carol. So I don't have any really prepared comments from the committee, but just speaking based on our discussions that we have already had and on what I know of some of the regions that are targeted, I just want to encourage you to be mindful of the transformation that this will bring about in the approach to developing a lot of properties that are currently off limits because of unsuitable soils for septic. And this is built into many of the sections on land preservation in the comprehensive plan now. And I think that it's important to realize that once that restriction is lifted, there's going to be some pressure for developing areas that were previously not developable. I recognize that this plan does a really good job of ensuring that sprawl development doesn't result from the implementation of county water and sewer because of, limiting it to these targeted areas, and I really appreciate that. But I also recognize that the county hasn't done a whole lot to assess the vulnerability to sea level rise in areas like the Itasca-Nanticoke bivalve area and the consequences of opening up areas to development that were previously not open because of unsuitable soils. Those unsuitable soils mean that that land is probably likely to represent a valuable natural resource. So this is just a request that you take into consideration the implications this may have for our natural resources as you move forward. And I really appreciate your work on it, and I do recognize that this is a very urgent issue in many areas. So I hope that you will give the public adequate opportunity to really reflect on and express our ideas about this in the future. Thanks again.
Yes, Dr. Stribling, I think it's a good idea that we have a lot of public input, so I'd like to see several hearings. Thank you. Do we have any more public comments? Any more public comments? All right, moving on to council comments. Do we have council comments? Any council comments? Okay, moving on, presidential comments. Some of the council members were able to attend the J. Miller Taw's Crab and Clam Bake last week, and it's opportunity to network and see a lot of our constituents and our colleagues. So it was a nice event, nice weather. So those of you that attended, it was nice seeing you there. And do want to mention that last night I was invited to attend an Eagle Scout ceremony last night at Asbury United Methodist Church, and it was a very nice event, and we gave proclamations to 4 young men: Alex Emert, Brandon Williams, Riley Bosman, and Riley Watson, obtaining the rank of Eagle Scout. That's a big honor and a lot of work and commitment for those young men, and something that they're going to have on their resume for a lifetime. So it was nice congratulating them. Also, one of the Parkside field hockey games this week was against North Carolina, and a friend of mine's daughter scored 4 goals. It was a 4-0 shutout, and her father's the one that passed away on the Bay Bridge, and he was a good friend of mine, so I wanted to bring that up and congratulate her. So sorry about that. Thank you. All right, now we're going to move on to open work sessions. Honorary street sign in honor Apostle James F. Green, Mr. Mark Whitelock, Deputy Director of Public Works.
Mr. President, do you want to adjourn from legislative session first?
Yes, I didn't have it on there. Yes, we do need to adjourn from legislative session and move to open work session. Do we have a motion?
Move.
And a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Now we're in open work session. Mr. Whitelock.
Good morning again. Mark Whitelock, Deputy Director of Public Works. If council's okay, I mean, we can talk about these two gentlemen together as a whole and then discuss where these signs and things would go separately at the end. So,
Ms. Harley, that doesn't have to be separate, does it?
It does not. I think we can combine.
We can do that, and we can vote on them separately.
okay. So, again, a first for me. I've never done an honorary street sign. So, we'll move forward. Which one did I have first? The Apostle James F. Green, the founder of the, let me see which church he was. Just bear with me a second. Pentecostal Church, Churches of Deliverance, I believe is the, no, is that the one Ernie, I'm sure Ernie knows. So we had him and we had Mr. Clinton Stewart, was the funeral director and owner of Stewart Funeral Homes. So as I moved forward, I looked at the criteria for honorary street signs, and I believe that both men were probably pillars of their community. I don't know that, and they certainly have a very good geographical foundation in this community. All seem to be of good moral character and basically meet all the criteria needed for honorary street signs. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay. Is there any questions on these separate signs? Did you mention both locations?
Both locations. One is Olivia Drive and West Road. It actually carries 3 signs because it's a street next to the funeral home. The church comes off of West Road. Well, no, so it was West Road and Olivia on Mr. Stewart, and it was Northwest Drive and East Road for Apostle Green.
Okay.
I have a
Mr. Holloway.
question. I think I brought this up before when we were doing a street sign. Is there a coordination between the name of the street now and the new name that's going to be added to it with 911 in case somebody calls in and says this is Norman Green's street instead of the street that it really is, so the 911 operators will know? Is that set up through?
So what happens is the street retains its original name.
That's correct.
This is a topper sign that goes on top of that. So anyone 911 addresses, to say I think what you're saying, if you called 911 and you use that honorary street,
right,
would that associate to 911? And that is a very good question. I don't know.
I think we need to check on that to make sure there's no confusion. You know, I don't know just how that all works over there. If they punch it into their computer, will it automatically pop up?
They can make a note on the computer for the address that it's also called this street.
What I'm saying is it needs to be coordinated so it does.
That's right.
Yeah, I can reach out to Director Shipley and coordinate that with him.
You said one of them's going to have 3 different signs?
Yeah, so the Apostle Green, his will actually be placed, it'll be called Green Way. It'll be placed at North Westover Drive and Rose Street, so you'll have one sign topper there.
Okay.
And another at North Westover Drive and East Road. So those are 2 different signs for him. Mr. Stewart, he actually has 3. His will be placed at West Road and Olivia Street. and another at East Road, so West Road and Olivia Street, East Road and Olivia Street, and Olivia and Ellington Streets.
Yeah, Mr. Holloway brought up a good point, so if we can make sure that the 911 center knows about these. Do we have any more questions or comments? Mr. Cannon?
I'm assuming you're going to use the current Wicomico logo?
Yes.
On the streets?
Yes.
And I believe what we currently have up probably should be replaced with the current logo as well.
Okay.
As opposed to the, 2019 logos that we
Yes.
were there?
Yes.
The anniversary logos?
Thank you.
The current logo is what? Is that?
The county seal.
That's our traditional.
This one that's on there
Yes,
now?
the current one, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
The ones that we have up now have the old Centennial logos up.
Just several years old. All right. Mr. Hastings, do you have a question? All right. Can somebody refresh my memory? How long do these signs stay up? Do they have to reapply?
That's actually one of the only things that I don't believe. I've read the legislation, and I don't believe I saw anything in there.
I think it's 10 years.
10 years?
I think so.
Okay.
Like I say, I actually have the legislation here. 10 consecutive years.
10 consecutive years. Okay, good.
For a
Any more
minimum.
questions or comments? All right. Both of these need a public hearing, which can be held November 2nd at 6 p.m. So if there's no further questions, we can put this on the agenda as a public hearing.
Could you find out about the 911 situation?
Find out
Just
about the 911, and I'll have
send it
all
to
the
us.
older signs taken down and new
Send it
ones.
to us so it won't hold up the meeting
Sure.
when it comes about.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Holloway. All right. Thank you. And next, we have a letter of support for the Orphans Court judge's salary to be increased from $9,500 to $11,600. Ms. Pam Olin, Director of Finance. You can join us. Would you introduce?
Yes, so this is Judge Bright, who is the actual requester. You are being passed along a letter that the administration received requesting this increase. Based on state law, this has to go to the state, so the council has to recommend an increase. There was not one recommended 4 years ago. So it has been 8 years since they have received an increase. Their workload has increased. They are eligible for county benefits, so the cost of our benefits have increased, so it's also cut down on how much they have as take-home themselves. And so the request that they have put in, the administration agrees that it is an appropriate request for the judges to receive an increase. And so we're asking council to be willing to send a letter of support to the state to have these increased. And the judge is available as additional questions as well.
All right. Do we have any questions for the judge or Ms. Olin? Ms. Holloway, you good? Mr. Davis? Mr. Hastings?
I just want to say thank you for your continued service. You know, you've been really amazing for all these years. So yeah, and this all looks good. I mean, the total salary, by the way, for anyone who's paying attention, it's going from $9,500 to $11,600 a year, which is not a terribly large amount of money. So happy to support.
Right. Ms. Bright, you've been doing this for a long time, so I think it's appropriate for you to put in a request. I think it's long overdue, and to be honest, I don't think it's enough.
Well, we'd be very happy if you'd like to.
I know you would. We can discuss that at a later date. Do we have any more questions or comments? Ms. Holloway.
On an average, what is your workload a week?
That is the pertinent question, and it's very difficult to answer. We meet 1 day a week. That's according to the Estates and Trust statute as it currently stands. We sometimes meet, not very often, but we sometimes meet a second day if there's more than we can get done in 1 day. Today we have 3 hearings. We have at least 1 hearing almost every week, but that's not where the job stops. And this is the part that has become increasingly time-consuming. We have to prepare for every case. Now, most of our work is not hearings, in-person hearings. It's overseeing accounts, and so we basically audit the accounts and approve or disapprove. Sometimes we have a stack like this, and sometimes on Tuesday we have a stack like this. So we might, I've many times we've done as many as 15 or 17 estates that we comb through document by document, and then we may have a hearing as well. We have hearings most weeks. Today we're going to have 3. I hope that I haven't checked the rest of the stack yet. I hope it's not huge. But the point is, we prepare for each hearing, and sometimes for just going over the files, depending on the nature of the estate. We prepare for these much like an attorney would. Not as in-depth because they're presenting the case, but we have to look up case law, we have to keep up with legislative changes, and this is work that has to be done at home, at night, on the computer. Now that we no longer have a law library, we have to do it wherever we can access the state or Westlaw or the state archives, something like that. So there's that. In addition to that, we are required to attend mandatory continuing education for 2 full days every year in Annapolis. In addition to that, we have mandatory online continuing education that must be done at home quarterly. In addition to that, and this doesn't go for all of us at any one time, but I am currently serving for the 3rd time in all these years as president of the Maryland Association of the Judges of the Orphans Court, which means we're having board meetings, and then once or twice a year we have a general meeting. I'm also on, I think it's my 5th term on the Conference of Orphans Court Judges, which was actually instituted since I've been on the bench in line with the Conference of Circuit Court Judges and the Conference of District Court Judges. These conferences are made up of judges from across the state, and we bring issues that affect our courts to the conference, and then the conference reports to the chief judge. So that's a place where I'm very proud to represent not only Wicomico County, but also the Lower Shore. This all takes time. I take time off from my full-time job, and it just takes time. And the cases, as people become more litigious, if I may just say one thing, because this is public record, and I want to get it out there. Almost nobody knows what the Orphans Court is or what it does. You see it on the ballot every 4 years, and every 4 years people go, oh yeah, I meant to see what that was. It's very obscure because our jurisdiction is very narrow. We oversee people's estates when they pass away. That is a sacred duty. We also oversee property guardianships for minors. That's a small piece of it. But we have a sacred duty to stand for people when they are no longer there to stand for themselves, and also to see that both their creditors and their heirs are treated fairly and correctly under the law. This means that we are the court that most people are going to have dealings with at some point in their lives. Not everybody, but most of us, because somebody you love is going to die, and when they do, they're going to own something, and that's going to have to be dealt with. And that's when it comes to us. And you may not need to see us. It may just be your paperwork that we see. But most people in this county are going to have dealings with our court. So I feel the work is really important. I feel that it's a sacred duty. And I personally am basically working on a volunteer basis, because even with the salary that we have, my entire salary is eaten up by health insurance premiums. My quarterly check is a portion of the expense money, which is included in that figure that you referenced, Mr. President, because it was set up years ago with salary and expense money, and now it's kind of all lumped together. So I am receiving a portion of the expense money, but the entire actual salary is, I'm very grateful to have the health insurance coverage. But for the person who comes next, it's really important to give them something for doing this work.
Right, and you bring up a good point. There are 3 judges.
Yes.
And they are all elected.
Yes.
So your request is not for your increase, it's for the next bench.
That's correct, thank you, and for pointing that out. It does not take effect until the next term, which comes after the next election. So I may never see a penny of this, but it's important that in order to get people who are willing to do this work and to invest the time to do the research that's necessary, to learn the law, to do the extraneous stuff that isn't extraneous, it's actually germane, it's the meat and potatoes of it. But it's not just about showing up on Tuesdays. And so to get somebody to do that, you gotta pay them.
I agree.
You know, I'm weird, I just love it, but.
Mr. Holloway, do you have a question?
We've seen how hard it was this morning to try to get volunteers to do the Allowance and Compensation Committee.
Yes.
You know, we have a lot of departments in the county that occasionally we'll hear complaints on where things don't go right, but I can't ever recall getting a complaint about this group of people. I think they do a good job. Like say, they work behind the scenes. You don't hear much of them. And I guess if the only time we would hear anything from you if something was wrong. So anyway.
That's right. And
I don't have a problem with this.
And I just don't get a chance to let this be known very much, so I'll try to stop talking in a minute. But we have a very low appeal rate. Appeals from the orphans court orders are taken to the circuit court. Our appeal rate is very low, and most of those appeals we're upheld. Our decision is upheld. So we feel very good about the work we're doing. And we work hard to make sure that we're understanding things and following the law and being fair to all the parties. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you. Do we have more questions or comments?
If I could just say one thing.
Yes.
Judge Bright has said that, you know, how they work other than Tuesdays. It's not unusual to get a call while they're meeting on Tuesday, and she'll say, I'm here with the rest of the orphans court. We got 2 questions for you. But you also get those calls on a Thursday when she's looking over an audit or something like that. So yeah, they spend a lot of time there.
It's a lot of work. Thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to check to see if we have a consensus for a letter of support. Mr. Cannon, Ms. Ackley?
Absolutely.
Mr. Davis, Mr. Holloway? And is Mr. McCain still on? Okay. You got a majority, so we'll get that prepared for you. Ms. Hurley will be in touch with you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. I
Thank you.
appreciate your time, and I appreciate the support, and thank you.
All right. Next, we have discussion on the draft of water and sewer master plan. I see Ms. McAllister, but I don't see Mr. Bozick.
No, he couldn't attend.
That's fine.
Remember, you're the only thing between us and lunch.
That's good. That means that I can pass. Okay, I did bring the presentation provided last time, if we need it for reference.
Yeah.
But I don't intend to go through that unless, you know, we need to look at a map or something.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll wait for you to introduce yourself when you're ready. No, you don't have to apologize.
So my name is Catherine McAllister. I'm an engineer with George Miles and Buer, and we were hired by Wicomico County in the executive office to complete this water and sewer master plan.
Okay.
So.
Did you catch any of the questions during public comment?
I did, yep. So first, I'd just like to start off with noting that we did present 2 council sessions ago. The overall purpose of this plan was to provide a plan to look at, you know, the county's existing growth areas, to see where you have failing septic issues. And we did develop a plan that I do want to emphasize is fluid, definitely. Maps are fluid, but it just hopefully gives you an idea of where to start if you are going to address these on-site systems that are failing. I did see, so a couple questions that came up. I'll start with the first one. Is there was discussion on why, you know, there's 12 areas. Let me, here. So there's 12 areas we identified. Why that stopped? No. If there's a reason why we're no longer sharing. Here we go. Let me try. here we go. Okay. So we did identify 12 areas during our presentation last time and within the study. These are those areas. I have a larger map here that might help. So 2 of the areas that we have not prioritized are this one right up here, if you can see my cursor. It is the Del Mar East community. And I would like to remind you, these are all based on the county's comprehensive plan and the growth areas that they have designated. That's where these areas come from. And on the east side of Del Mar, the town of Del Mar, there's a town transition area that is identified in the comp plan. We have met with the town of Del Mar and, reviewed this area, and there's just not a lot of growth or a lot of existing communities in this area. So at this point, we did not consider that one of the top priorities that the county would probably pursue to serve with central water or sewer. And then the second area out of those 12 is this area it's actually right between Willards and Pittsville. Again, there's no existing larger communities there. We are not aware of many failing septic systems, and we did talk to both Willards and Pittsville, and they also did not see this area becoming a growth area, really. So even though in the comp plan, those 2 areas are identified as growth areas, they may be, in 20, 30 years. And at that point, the maps can change. But at this point, we just did not anticipate those being a large growth area.
At the last meeting, it was either you or Mr. Bozick stated that you hadn't talked to all of the town councils yet.
We have, yeah.
You have since then?
That was, though, I will say, it's probably been over a year that we've talked to most of them. We have not talked to them since this plan has been published.
Okay.
So I do think, at some point, either through the executive office or the Public Works Department, they are talked to again. But we did sit with all of them, and they all had basically the same feeling that they've identified their growth areas, they've invested in their sewer and water, and they were all willing to partner wherever possible.
Real quick, the low-density areas you were talking about, so that represents the 5,000 houses you were referencing, or just part of those 5,000?
So all of these areas combined represent the 5,000. So I think total, there was about 18,000 on-site septic systems that we're dealing with right now. There was about 6,000 of those that are within an existing town or city's municipal growth boundary. And then the remaining 4 to 5 would be within these colored areas that we identify right now. Going back to, I believe that answered one of the questions that was asked from the public, and please feel free to ask any other questions. The other comments that were made, I believe, was regarding the fact that, yes, agreed, there needs to be a lot of open communication and public discussion. Again, this is a plan that hopefully is just to provide an overview and give you guys a starting point. The next steps, which we did discuss in the presentation, I think are very important. Like if we look at step 1, even though from the management side, you would approve the master plan, you would fund a water division, I think on the technology side, it's very important. The next steps would be to continue to do studies. The county will need discharge capacity, and that requires some very detailed modeling of the hydrology of your area and of these areas, looking at the nutrient loads and doing detailed technology studies on that. If the county can get discharge permits from the state, that's when you can start looking at what type of funding you get and start looking at user rates. But that is step 1.
Mr. Holloway.
Yep.
I put it in presentation mode too, by the way.
Okay, when I do that, I have
see
to,
some squinting, or no worries if you can't. I see some folks in the audience squinting.
I'm squinting too. Bring some binoculars.
Does that help?
Yeah.
A little bit? Okay.
Yes.
We hear a lot about failing septic systems.
Press your button.
we hear a lot about failing septic systems. And the area that you don't have identified where we have the biggest problems on your map here is the area directly east of Salisbury.
That's right.
I mean, that's where our problems are. I guess I'm not saying that there's not problems elsewhere, but that seems to, I mean, we have homes in that area right there now that are not even allowed to put septics in, that they're having to have their tanks pumped out periodically. So can you explain that?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm going to go back to the map of the existing municipality boundaries. Well, their growth boundaries, I think, is very important here. You know, you really, from an engineering, from a technical standpoint, you do not want to duplicate services. You don't want existing pump stations and sewer mains to be in the road and then the county come through and on the other side of the road put more. So these boundaries are, from our knowledge, the existing towns and cities' growth boundaries. So we, under this plan, did not recommend that the county goes in and puts duplicate services within those existing municipal boundaries.
So you're saying that the city should service those areas, the city of Salisbury, just east of Salisbury?
Maybe there could be some type of collaboration where, you know, the county may assist in funding grant funds, but as far as how they are served, you know, from a political standpoint, how that works out, we did not get involved in that. But yes, from a technical standpoint, we believe anybody within a municipal growth boundary should be served by that municipality.
Okay. The problem is there that as of right now, the city doesn't do that without annexation. So.
And we heard that from all of the municipalities we talked to.
Yeah.
There weren't many. Down at Delmar was one that was open for urban services, but that was the only one.
So,
I don't believe that. I don't believe they said directly that. Yeah.
So I've been told that you don't have to be annexed unless you want to be annexed, correct? In other words, a city can't come along and just annex you.
I don't believe so.
I can tell you.
Yeah.
In order to be annexed, a certain percentage of the people living in the area, they don't even have to be owners. They can upset that.
Okay. All right. So I guess what I'm getting at is they're not going to be able to get city water and sewer services unless they agree to be annexed, correct?
That's a question you probably need to talk to the municipality about. So our recommendation is for the county, you know, to get into the water and sewer business, have an operations division, and serve folks that are not currently within any boundary of a municipality. As you move forward that way, you may find you have other alternatives as far as working with municipalities to help share some of the burdens that they have. But at this point, starting in the water and sewer area within a municipal growth boundary may not be advantageous. But again, the plan's fluid.
Well, we understand that, and you know, we're just starting out. But when you start annexing and moving your growth area, moving your water and sewer out, then you're also moving your boundaries out. So
where does it end?
Come to where does it end?
So you mean where would the municipality end and you start?
Like you said, if it's annexed out, okay, you get to the point where, okay, we've annexed out this far. We've got water and sewer here, so why don't we just keep going? You said, look, kind of where does it end?
Right, and that's my question as well. Because like the boundaries you see up there, if somebody lives outside the boundaries and then that boundary is expanded a certain distance, and then you could say the same thing you just told us, not duplicate services, and then where does it end? It's going to keep expanding.
But to be clear, you mean municipally, or do you mean the county itself?
No, municipally.
So yeah, which is then
for those
part
services.
Of whether or not the municipality wants to be a part of that area, it's not financially advantageous for some of the municipalities to do the growth that you might be imagining. But for the county, again, that's where I guess we're trying to fill in, right? We're trying to fill in the gaps for the county.
Well,
right.
So you'll see, we do have another map in the report that shows them right next to each other. You know, Salisbury's boundary right next to these recommended county boundaries areas.
At some point, they're
and
going to meet.
They meet perfectly,
Right.
to be honest with you. You'll see in your comp plan, so let me just go to one other map here. Sorry to keep jumping around on you. This is a map that really needs to be referenced frequently. It was updated in 2017 by the county, and this is the boundaries that you see replicated on the water and sewer plan maps.
Okay.
Anything colored is considered a growth area by the county, and I believe also by Maryland Department of Planning has looked at these. So anything in white, at this point, we have not shown as served with public water and sewer. There might be large communities that border some of these colored areas, and you find that providing them public water and sewer is advantageous and they need it. They have failing issues. But you'll see, I know it's very small, I apologize, but the gray area is the city of Salisbury, and there's a lot of county colored areas within that. And that's where, from a technical standpoint, it's just very hard to show the county coming in there and economically serving them with public sewer.
Right, because these gaps are surrounded
Their
by
gaps
the city.
are surrounded, yes. But the yellow areas, that's your communities that we have identified.
Well, let's go back to this east side that's close to Salisbury. Okay, getting them to serve that. We have a section up off of North Salisbury Boulevard, Cherry Way, Pine Way, Maple Way, that's basically in the middle of Salisbury that they don't even serve because it's not financially advantageous to them to do that. So how do we, this is the area that has the most problems right now. Do we go after that area first before we go after areas that's not having the most problems? Or do we go after areas that's not having as much of a problem and let that escape? So, I agree that, we need to work on water and sewer plan, but we need to work on a water and sewer plan as to where the most problems are presently.
I think I would have to say I think there are multiple problems throughout the county. Granted, maybe those areas have been some of the hot spots and have been the most discussed. But there are other areas in the county you'll see on this map that was recently updated by the health department, where the health department is struggling to find these. Yes, so there's a lot of areas here that the county could address and focus on, while you also simultaneously have discussions with municipalities to determine what's the best option in the other areas.
Is that red area is the health department hotspots?
The red and pink are the health department hotspots. So yes, while a lot of them do surround Salisbury, there's a lot on the outskirts also.
Is there an overlay map to show those hotspots compared to your map?
We could definitely provide that. That would be pretty easy. I'll tell you though, my cursor.
Those hotspots can be as many as 1 or 2 houses as opposed to.
Yeah, so yeah, that is something to keep about. So this area down here to the south on the east side, that's your Colburn Mill community that we've identified. You also have the areas up here along Old Ocean City Road. That's the Parsonsburg community area that we identified. And again, that area is fluid. I could see you coming right up to where other public services stop, because that has been a major problem. You've got Whitehaven down here that has failing systems. You've got the area out by Bivalve, Nanacoke, Tyaskin, and you've got areas in Mardella. And these are all areas, where the health department is really struggling to find solutions. And I do feel, it should be recognized that the county may be able to economically serve these areas sooner than later. And while, as you're doing this and you're developing your water department, you may find you can partner in other areas also, near other municipalities.
And at some point soon, before we really get started, we're going to have to hire the operations department.
Yeah.
And an operations director. On your view, would that fall under the public works director, or would that be a separate department?
I believe the study recommends starting a water department, and that would start underneath the public works departments. So, you know, you have engineering, you have roads, and then you'd probably have a water department.
Okay.
And there could be a director of public works that has experience, or even somebody in the water department, director of the water department. As you grow, and if you grow beyond even the 5,000, you know, future homes, you might find that moves out of the public works and has its own group. Similar, I think in the study, it's similar to like the police department or similar
Yes.
to the Wicomico Board of Ed.
Okay.
But to start, you know, you can share resources. You know, you can share the finance department accounting system versus developing all of your own. So at this point, I say it would stay under the Public Works Department, but.
So we'd probably need to have a public works director before we get started.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's needed, so.
I mean, and that goes back to the steps, you know, that's from the manager's side, from your guys' side, you know, adopting this plan that you want to move forward with. It doesn't mean you're adopting every single map as is, but you're adopting the idea, you start a water department, and then one of the big next steps is aligning your water and sewer plan maps with where you do want to serve. Because funding, state funding and grant fundings are not available unless, you know, the planning, Maryland Department of Planning and Zoning, everything aligns properly.
To go to that process where we say, well, we're going to begin hiring people, we're going to create a department and everything, do you think it would first benefit us to maybe do some type of a study with the public in general to know what their needs are, or what they assess as to how accepting they're going to be of this whole process? I mean, we could create the entire department and, you know, fund it and get the build out, and then you'll have people who are going to be rejecting this and saying, I don't want to pay for this. I certainly don't want to be annexed. So that's my concern, because even with Morris Mill, I think from what you may have learned there, there were residents that still were pushing against anything to do with being, you know, acclimated to the water and sewer system. So what happens in Wicomico County when you have, you know, 5,000 households and, you know, 4,000 say, I'm not going to start getting charged until until the septic is coming up in my living room. How are we going to anticipate what the need is or may not be, and whether or not we're going to get total pushback?
I would say, you know, I think you need to do multiple steps, you know, simultaneously. You need to have these public meetings, whether it's through a study or however you handle that. But at the same time, you really need to do the feasibility of finding discharge permits and doing the science part of, you know, modeling your hydrology, because with that and with changing your maps, you can figure out what type of funding you're getting. A lot of folks are going to say, oh, sounds great. How much am I going to pay?
Right.
And you don't know how much you're going to pay until you've designated the fact that you're willing to serve them. By mapping them an S2, it's called an S2 in the water and sewer plan. That means you're planning to serve them. Doesn't mean you've, you know, put your foot down, we're serving them, they're being served. It's just saying you intend to, you know, if everything aligns properly. But until it's mapped, until you have the discharge capacity, you know where you're working, it's very hard to come up with a cost. And
the only reason I ask that is because, except for the areas that may be involved with the municipalities, anything that we may do independently is all about numbers.
Yes, yeah, it is. And in order for the state to tell you what they'll give you, they have to, you know, all the planning departments have to be on the same page.
John, you're talking about pushback. We already heard something this morning from the folks that made the public comments.
That's right.
That we're going to hear, you know, is it going to create growth in these areas, you know, like Tyaskin or whatever, or Whitehaven, you know, is those areas, it's small, quaint areas that we put in septic and water, is there going to be a spurt of growth because we do have water and sewer now in that areas, you know, so that's going to be just part of it. And the other parts, of course, is going to be how much people are going to have to pay to be hooked up and how they're going to be served. Do they want to be annexed into the city of Salisbury, or do they not want to be annexed into the city of Salisbury? Do they want water and sewer and not be annexed in? So I think that's a lot of the things we have to find out.
I agree.
And I think it's important that, I mean, we wanted this because we recognize it is the absolute highest priority and it needs to be done. Any further thought as far as any incentive programs to kick in? Like, you know, when you may say, well, for the first 10 years or the first 5 years, your costs are reduced or limited or not. Is there anything that you might think that we can learn from?
I would probably refer back, maybe talk to Pete about that, just from his past experience. I think we could probably find examples of other, even Maryland counties that have gone through this, and maybe they've found, USDA might offer some type of program to help those folks that it's hard to connect. Because in addition to what the county puts in on the public side, each home needs to connect to the public system, and that's a cost. They need to get from their septic tank now into your system. So there is probably programs out there that help.
And the county won't be hooking people up for free. There's going to be a fee.
Oh, yeah. There's
The
going to be
county can't afford to do that.
Yeah.
No, I had a town hall in Whitehaven, probably over a year ago, because we were having these failing septic systems, and MDE was there, and they had mentioned a program, a grant program that they had that would waive the cost if they tied in. And I can't even think of what the program was, and I don't even know if it's still available. And it may have just been for these priority areas. Do you remember, Ms. Hurley?
I remember it being discussed, but I don't remember the name of the program.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I can look into that.
Okay.
There is
back to you.
There is a definition I know that they had a couple years ago with the Bay Restoration Fund, getting funds through that. If there's
Yes.
any area of, they created a state definition of area of public health concern based after Talbot County and the rural communities that they've had there. So from that, and those are areas of high concentration of failing septic systems, which the little red and pink dots that we see up there, that's only because, there's only homes and, a couple of those homes have said that they've had issues. But the truth is, it's all over the county. It's not just the western side. So I think maybe there's definitely options, and I think the state and federal government are focused on that now, and there's money available now. The more that we can strike while the iron's hot, I think the better chance of...
Right, the ARP funds are available.
Exactly, and it's only going to keep getting worse. There'll be more people who don't have the room to replace their septic system or their drain field. But I think, it's just important, if the county wants to move forward with this, do you know what I mean? The next steps would be, as we showed in step 1, and trying to find discharge capacity and trying to find what kind of grants and loans you can obtain to do it. And I would also just I know there was some part of the public comment was regarding growth. I will say that, and most of you, I think we discussed last meeting, is the state will only fund existing homes, existing people that are already there that have failing systems. You are not going to get grant funding, to build in twice the capacity. You're just not going to get the funding. If the county chooses under local dollars to do some additional capacity, that's fine, but the grant funding will only fund existing
homes.
How about infill development? Okay, so you have a pipe running down the road, and there's 5 building lots that's empty, and then there's more houses. You get the grants for that. How does that work?
So we did take that into account in the study, and the cost that we provided does include the infill, just the parcels that are already there that are vacant. But growth needs to play for growth. You know what I mean? If there is any development, they're going to have to come through and pay for that.
You should have been here when we were doing the Horizon project. But anyway, okay. So you say the first thing is the mass. I look at Rumley, how the Somerset County handled that, and when you look at that, is that something like what we would look at for Tyaskin or Whitehaven? Paul, you were a resident down there. Do you want to give a little insight on that?
I'm not familiar with that.
A homeowner down there, anyway.
I know they've got a lot of fire hydrants down there, so they have water.
Right, they have water, they don't have sewer.
They don't have sewer. Okay.
Right.
All right. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Just like Mardella, right?
And you're just,
Okay.
just pay your quarterly water bill.
Yeah, well, I was talking about the cost of running it. I was talking about the cost of running it and manning it. How did they get it there, I guess is what I was coming at,
For my time.
Yeah.
I think, though, that's all built into the user rate you monthly charge. You take that into account, making sure whatever money you're collecting pays for your operations costs.
So when you say the state won't pay for undeveloped, but then you have this infill situation after the project is completed, does the people that hook up to that have to pay the state back part of that, or what?
Well, they would pay for their own infrastructure, obviously. And if there is no discharge capacity, there's no discharge capacity. So they need to take into account, how do they discharge their flow? You know what I mean? Or how do they pay the county to increase your discharge, whether it's land application or other alternatives?
I don't think you understand my question. So you run
the state's only going to pay for existing homes.
Right. So you
any other capacity built into that is paid by the county locally. So that developer would be paying you back, essentially, under that.
So you have a pipe, sewer and water running down a road, and you've got 5 empty lots. Nobody's built on them yet. Then 5 years after you put this all together, somebody comes along and builds on them. Does that mean they can't hook up to it, or they can hook up to it? What are you saying?
Yeah, I think I know the answer to that. I think what she's saying is, if the 5 homes take 100,000 gallons a day, that's all the state will finance. But you're going to have some infill lots. Well, if you only pay for the 100,000 gallons, when the infill, there's no capacity. Is that what you're saying?
I believe
so they would have the county would have to pay for the extra capacity to cover these infill lots if they're going to hook into the system. Is that right?
Yes. And, you know, there will be some capacity for infill. I mean, to a degree that's reasonable. But you're not going to have 100 community development come in and there'll be capacity for that. You know, that is considered growth, and that would be changing the existing, you know, zoning, the existing makeup of what's there already. And that type of development would have to pay for itself. Whether you have, you know, a vacant building and someone comes in and rehabs it, yes, I believe they would be connected.
Well, we know they have to pay, but you're saying there's not the capacity. That's what I'm getting at. We know they'd have to pay to hook up if they could hook up, but you're saying there's not the capacity because the state's only financed 5 years ago enough capacity for what was there.
If there's no capacity, then no, you're right.
So that can't be changed?
Okay, so let's just take Whitehaven, for example.
Yes.
And, you know, there's 30 homes or whatever, and you guys want it fully funded by the state to build their treatment plant. Let's say they give you 80% grant, and that covers those 30 homes, and you choose just to build your plant at that flow. If you choose to increase that flow to allow for future growth, whatever that difference is, you can do that from day one, but that funding is going to have to come from a local share. In the future, let's say you have a treatment system and you want to add to it. Yes, you can add to it, but it's going to have to be paid for from local share or from the developer.
Right.
And there's also the fact that you need additional discharge capacity, which will have to be negotiated with the state, you know, land application options. That would have to be covered by that developer.
See, a lot of these questions we're asking, I don't think we're getting a full answer, so it's kind of confusing, and I think it's...
I think the best thing, if you look at the plan does not talk, you know, the plan is looking at your existing issues and your existing concerns, and that's what we are addressing.
I think, personally, I would like to see all the answers before we jump right in and say, okay, let's approve this document.
Like you say, we've already heard a concern this morning about future growth when the systems go in. So we have to address that too, to some point.
I recognize that.
Right.
Yep.
Mr. Hastings.
Thank you, by the way. And I know this is also, by the way, I know this is a moving target. A lot of this, it's going to depend upon what's available, what the developer puts up, what state money's there, what local, you know, there's a whole lot of question marks, but at least that we're moving in the direction, I think, is a positive thing. So Ted, a couple things I wanted to bring up. First of all, I have heard since you guys first came here, you know, I think I did mention you before, a couple people had mentioned that they questioned why there were certain communities, you know, look like the list that was put up so far for priorities, you know, seeming to be, you know, not places where people of color are at or other kind of things. So, and there was a meeting on, there was one of the local movie things was put together about saving San Domingo. Our local artists, local individuals put that movie together. They had a reception at Salisbury University. The question there is, where is San Domingo going? Places like that, is that area going to continue to become more and more dilapidated, or is it going to be a future area of growth? Which I think the answer is obviously in the comp plan or in the growth plan. It's currently places like that may not be in the growth area as it currently is. I know there's a lot of folks in the back of the room who have a lot of good expertise. To answer some of these other questions, the questions that I had to you as far as the growth and where is it going, the growth tier mapping, tier 3 or tier 4 are usually areas you don't, you want to stay away from growing. Does any of the current plan as it is put together, as you have marked out, does that include growth into, is it only tier 1, tier 2, or is it going into 2, 3, or 4? Do you know?
So we did include the growth tier maps for the existing municipalities, if those are the areas.
What about, I'm assuming, hopefully that there's not much growth outside of that.
No, so
okay,
these growth maps actually are pretty consistent with your guys' comprehensive plan.
Should be,
map.
Yeah,
for the areas you colored. So that's what we followed.
Good.
But in the San Domingo area, I think once the county is in the water and sewer business, if you say it that way, there will be more options out there. You could partner with Sharptown and serve them via Sharptown. If Mardella has a system, do you know what I mean? You could partner with Mardella, or if you find, the package systems like in Whitehaven on their own are economically feasible, you might put a package system in there. And that's, I think, where we mean the maps are fluid, as you start developing the department and getting into the water and sewer business, you'll have a lot more options as far as who you serve and how you serve them.
Makes sense.
Go ahead, Mr. Hastings.
I would say last 2 questions here, last pieces. Obviously, the issues that we have with Morris Mill or was it tetrachlorocycline or whatever the chemicals are, you probably don't know this, but I'm going to ask anyhow. Do we test throughout the county throughout the wells throughout the rest of the county, or who does that? I'm assuming MDE or somebody has some sort of...
Yeah, I do know City of Fruitland tests quarterly on their city wells, just because they were the ones that bordered that TCE, that plume that they found in Morris Mill. The health department probably could answer that better, if they're testing other local wells. But if a municipality tests, it's probably up to the municipality. I know City of Fruitland chooses to do that test.
What would be nice, what I'm thinking is mainly the areas outside of these. I don't know where else that's happening, but certainly that could inform where we, that could help add to the plan to make sure that we're hooking up more folks so they're not getting poisoned.
Yeah, I will just say from experience, when we did the Morris Mill area, there were areas to the east of that, neighborhoods that found issues with their wells, and they were individually addressed. But yeah, that does happen.
And the last thing I had was so just trying to get an understanding, I guess, process-wise, which I know you have pulled together. So we probably need the county, I'm assuming, is probably going to need to hire a staff member, at least one person, in order to help add, or to serve, whether that be under the Department of Public Works or whomever. We're going to need to have a lead person likely helping manage most of this. And then, so then we'll have a series of public plans, I guess, public input sessions or something like that. And so I guess that's where we're going, right?
Yeah, in order to answer all the questions, you really need to move forward, commit to what you want to do, and, do the science studies behind it, the hydrological modeling and all of that. And then at the same time, have your public hearings, to develop your areas and control growth or whatever needs to be done. But at this point, this is just a plan to give you the starting blocks. Mm-hmm. But again, to get all the answers, the next steps need to be taken. Because I will say, and I believe this was mentioned last time, the state did see some of your, potential areas, and they were ranked very highly, as far as, whether you would get funding or not get funding. They were ranked very high. It's just, they weren't consistent with the planning maps, and therefore you didn't get assigned a certain amount of monies that you would have been awarded.
And we need to do we need to accept this plan and then use that's going to be our basis of our plan, or is this plan that you've put together is kind of is this open for additional changes or anything from the public, or?
I mean, I think this plan could change multiple times over the years, without a doubt.
Yeah, I see.
But I think if it's agreed that it's supported, that this idea that we're going to get into water sewers is supported, you would acknowledge that, recommend, approve the plan, so the county executive and county public works department can move forward initiating these next steps.
Right. Now, I've heard some discussions from other council members that have talked to some of the towns, and I'm not advocating this question, but with your discussions, did any of the towns indicate that they may want to turn their water system and water and sewer system over to the county?
No, not directly. Okay. I think, sometimes you need to, they don't really know what the county's going to have at this point, because you don't have anything at this point. But I think if you have an operations division, you might find that throughout the county, throughout the municipalities, and the technology that's available now, you could share those resources.
Sure.
I mean, I do know some of the municipalities we work with, it is very hard to find operators. It is very hard, to keep several folks staffed. And you've got one operator who's working 7 days a week, and it's just not sustainable forever. So yes, I do think if the county gets into the business and develops a reputation, successfully does this, I think you'll be able to offer a lot more to some of these municipalities that are struggling.
Okay, I mentioned this earlier, and Mr. Hastings mentioned it about hiring an employee. What kind of credentials should the first employee have? Because we need somebody with expertise.
Yes, as from an engineer, that's my first thing that comes to mind, but I think you really also need somebody who has expertise in writing grants, handling, the management structure of this, versus the engineering side where you could always, contract with other folks who have that expertise. I could talk more about that, with Pete and see, but I do think you need somebody who has the ability, because these first parts are getting money, getting grants, getting through the planning process.
And that's why I think we need somebody to sit where you're sitting that's in-house to guide us through this.
It's a lot, and somebody who is in charge of doing this every day, 40 hours a week, would be very advantageous to keep you guys moving.
And especially if they know where to seek out the grants.
Yes.
It sounds like a job offer.
What was that?
It sounds like a job offer.
Any more questions or comments? Mr. Hastings.
I'll just say, it's as soon as we can get this going, I'll be happy to have that happen. I think this is the biggest thing that's held the county back from growth. That being said, I want to make sure that we have the right growth. Obviously, we still want to say an agricultural community. Purdue is still headquartered here and all that, but it'd be nice to be able to actually have real substantial growth, and we have a lot of space for infill in most of our municipalities. So the faster that we can get all this going, I'd be happy to see that happen.
Right. And Mr. Cannon, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's a great report. It's someone else, I think, at the public comment said it's a really excellent report, and it really is. I might have been President Shiny or Mrs. Shine. But we are going to hear, and we have to recognize that we're going to have second guessing. We're going to have naysayers. You're going to have devil's advocates to a fault. But I think, as a body, as leaders in this community, we have to recognize it. We don't fall victim to any type of paralysis by analysis, which is I like to say, and do our due diligence. But we have to move forward and not lose sight of the big picture. We want to make this work.
Absolutely.
The big picture is huge. I mean, that's what this is, big picture.
Yes.
And then you go individually as you need to.
Yep.
Right, and I think in the very near future, the council should have a town hall at minimum and invite citizens to hear what they have to say. We've already heard from a select group here today, and they brought us some very good points, but I want to hear what's going on throughout the entire county.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, any more questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Davis gone. Well, thank you very much. You did a splendid job again, and we'll be in touch with you. I'm not sure that we're ready to go ahead and jump on it and approve this right away, because we do have to hear what the public has to say. So we're working on it. This is something that's going on for at least 20 years, and this council is committed. So I'm glad to see that, and I'm glad to see the citizens are committed as well. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you.
Ms. Harley, do we have anything else?
I have one thing.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mitchell.
I sent a memo out about the Harmon project, raised some issues and some questions.
Yes.
And to pros, some ways it could be changed. I spoke with Mr. Wilbur about that after the council was okay with that. And as I understand, he's aware of these issues. I think that if the council wants to get by them, they can. But there's some other issues on their end. They're not quite ready at this point.
Okay. Well, we'll look at them. Thank you. All right, need a motion? Thank you all. Ms. Harley, is lunch served?
I'm expecting it at any minute, though.
Okay. So she wasn't between us and lunch.